Welcome to Pastor Andrew's Inspirations. If you enjoy these videos, please click on the red subscribe button below the video and click the bell for more. Welcome to our online church, a congregation made up of many from around the world. No offering is necessary. Subscribing and watching videos will keep us alive under God's watchful eyes. Today, we will be continuing the biblical names, starting with B, Part 3. Baanah was one of Ishbosheth's army captains in 2 Samuel chapter 4, verse 2. Baanah, the Netophathite, was the father of Heleb, one of King David's warriors, in 2 Samuel chapter 23, verse 29, and 1 Chronicles chapter 11, verse 30. Baanah, the son of Ahilud, was one of Solomon's 12 regional administrators, having jurisdiction over Tanakh, Megiddo, and Bethshean in 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 12. And then there is Baanah, the son of Hushai, who was one of Solomon's 12 regional administrators, having jurisdiction over Asher and Aloth in 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 16. Baarah was one of 3 wives and of Shaharaim, according to 1 Chronicles chapter 8, verse 8. And then there's Baasha, who became king of Israel in the 3rd year of Asa, king of Judah, in 1 Kings chapter 15, verse 28. Baasha came to power by murdering the previous king, Nadab, at Gibbethon, followed by the entire house of Jeroboam, Nadab's father and predecessor. Baasha had previously been a captain in Nadab's own army. Like many military leaders, he appears to have risen from obscurity. The Jewish Encyclopedia suggests that because he came from the tribe of Issachar, he may have represented a local faction. Over the course of his 24-year reign, Baasha was at war with Asa, king of Judah. He allied Israel with Aram and endeavored to strangle Judah's trade by fortifying Ramah, a city 5 miles north of Jerusalem. King Asa of Judah then bribed King Ben-Hadad of Syria to switch sides and attack Israel. This prompted the loss of extensive territory in Dan and Naphtali, northwest of the Sea of Galilee. Baasha was forced to withdraw from Ramah. Asa of Judah utilized the materials of the abandoned fort for the fortification of his own frontier towns, Geba and Mizpah. Though Baasha remained in power for life, he was not without his opponents. The prophet Jehu, the son of Hanani, foretold the destruction of his dynasty, which came to pass with the assassination of Baasha's son Elah. Balaam is a diviner in the Torah, whose story begins in chapter 22 of the book of Numbers. Every ancient reference to Balaam considers him a non-Israelite, a prophet, and the son of Beor, though Beor is not clearly identified. Though some sources may only describe the positive blessings he delivers upon the Israelites, he is revealed as a wicked man in both the Torah and the New Testament in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 15, and in Judah chapter 1, verse 11, and Revelation chapter 2, verse 14. Balaam refused to speak what God did not speak and would not curse the Israelites, even though King Balak of Moab offered him money to do so in Numbers chapters 22 to 24. But Balaam's error and the source of his wickedness came from sabotaging the Israelites as they entered the promised land. According to Revelation chapter 2 verse 14, Balaam told King Balak how to get the Israelites to commit sin by enticing them with sexual immorality and food sacrificed to idols. The Israelites fell into transgression due to these traps. God then sent a deadly plague to them as a result in Numbers chapter 31 verse 16. The main story of Balaam occurs during the sojourn of the Israelites in the plains of Moab, east of the Jordan River, at the close of 40 years of wandering, shortly before the death of Moses and the crossing of the Jordan. The Israelites have already defeated two kings in Transjordan, Sihon, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan. Balak, king of Moab, thus becomes alarmed and sends elders of Midian and his Moabite messengers to Balaam, son of Beor, to induce him to come and curse Israel. Balaam's location, Pethor, is simply given as which is by the river of the land of children of his people. In the Masoretic text and the Septuagint, though the Samaritan Pentateuch, Vulgate, and Peshitta all identify his land as Ammon. Balaam sends back word that he can only do what Yahweh commands, and God has, via a nocturnal dream, told him to go. Balak, therefore, sends higher ranking priests and offers Balaam honors. Balaam continues to press God. Then God finally permits him to go, but with instructions to say only what he commands. Balaam then sets out in the morning with the princes of Moab. God becomes angry that he went and sends the angel of the Lord in Numbers chapter 22, verse 22, to prevent him. At first the angel is seen only by the donkey Balaam in riding, which tries to avoid the angel. After Balaam starts punishing the donkey for refusing to move, it is miraculously given the power to speak to Balaam in Numbers chapter 22, verse 28. And it complains about Balaam's treatment. At this point, Balaam is allowed to see the angel, who informs him that the donkey's turning away from the messenger is the only reason the angel did not kill Balaam. Balaam immediately repents, but is told to go on. Balak meets with Balaam at Kirjath Huzoth. They go to the high places of Baal and offer sacrifices on 7 altars, leading to Balaam being given a prophecy by Yahweh, which he speaks to Balak. However, the prophecy blesses Israel. Balak protests, but Balaam reminds him that he can only speak the words put in his mouth. So Balak takes him to another high place at Pisgah to try again, building another 7 altars here and making sacrifices on each. Balaam provides another prophecy blessing Israel. Balaam finally gets taken by a now very frustrated Balak to Peor. after the seven sacrifices there, he decides not to seek enchantments, but instead looks upon the Israelites from the peak. The Spirit of God comes upon Balaam, and he delivers a third position prophecy concerning Israel. Balak's anger rises to the point where he threatens Balaam, but Balaam merely offers a prediction of fate. Balaam then looks upon the Canaanites and Amalekites and offers two more predictions of their fates. Balak and Balaam then go to their respective homes. Numbers chapter 25 verses 1 to 9 describes how Israel engaged in the heresy of Peor. Numbers chapter 31 verse 16 blames this on Balaam's advice and because of his liability in the incident, which resulted in deadly divine judgments against the Israelites. At last, the ones who participated. He was eventually killed in a retaliatory battle against Midian in Numbers chapter 31 verse 8. In Deuteronomy chapter 23 verses 3 to 6, it summarizes these incidents and further states that the Ammonites were associated with the Moabites. Joshua, in his farewell speech, also makes reference to it, with God's protection taken from him. Balaam is later listed among the Midianites who were killed in revenge for the matter of Peor. Joshua chapter 13 verse 22 records that Balaam died by the sword during a battle for the Reubenite occupation of Moabite land. Revelation also states that Balaam taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel. A man also named Balaam also figures as an example of a false prophet, motivated by greed or avarice in both 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 15 and in Judah chapter 1 verse 11. This Balaam is listed as the son of Bezer, which is usually identified as Beor. Some claim that Bezer was the Aramaic pronunciation of Beor, while others hold that the author was attempting to play off the Hebrew word bazar, or flesh, to insult Balaam. Later, Jewish tradition similarity played with Balaam's name to call him corrupt and imply bestiality. Still others hold that Bazar and Beor are distinct, while still identifying the Balaams of the Old and New Testaments, claiming that Beor is Balaam's father and Bezer is Balaam's hometown. Baladan was a Chaldean leader from the Bit Yakin tribe originally established in the territory that once made the Sealand in southern Babylonia. He seized the Babylonian throne in 722 BC from Assyrian control and reigned from 722 to 710 BC and from 703 to 702 BC. His reign is defined by some historians as an illegitimate third dynasty of the Sealand, inside of the 10th dynasty of Babylon or Assyrian dynasty. He was known as one of the kings who maintained Babylonian independence in the face of Assyrian military supremacy for more than a decade. Sargon of Assyria repressed the allies of Marduk Apla Edina II in Elam, Aram, and Israel, and eventually drove him from Babylon. After the death of Sargon, Marduk Apla Edina II briefly recaptured the throne from a native Babylonian nobleman. He reigned 9 months, from 703 to 702. He returned from Elam and ignited rebellion in Babylonia. He was able to enter Babylon and be declared king again. 9 months later, he was defeated near Kish by the Assyrians, but managed to flee to Elam. He died in exile a couple of years later. He is mentioned as king of Babylon in the days of King Hezekiah, both in 2 Kings chapter 20 verse 12 and in Isaiah chapter 39 verse 1. In both passages he sends Hezekiah a letter, having heard of his illness and recovery. His messengers who have delivered the letter are lavishly entertained by Hezekiah. The prophet Isaiah, to criticize Hezekiah for his excessive openness about the wealth he had amassed, Balak was a king of Moab, described in the book of Numbers. In the Hebrew Bible, where his dealings with the prophet Balaam are recounted, Balak tried to engage Balaam for the purpose of cursing the migrating Israelite community. On his journey to meet the princess of Moab, Balaam is stopped by an angel of the Lord after beating his donkey. He tells the angel he will return home. I have sinned, for I did not know that you stood against me on the road. The angel instructs Balaam to attend the meeting with the princes of Moab, but to say only what I tell you. According to Numbers chapter 22 verse 2 and Joshua chapter 24 verse 9, Balak was the son of Zippor. In the preceding chapter of Numbers, the Israelites seeking the promised land following their exodus from Egypt, defeating the Canaanites at a place named Harmah, as well as the Amorites and the people of Bashan, and the next approached Moab. The biblical narrative stresses the fears of the people of Moab, who were exceedingly afraid and sick with dread. Their fears appear to relate to the size of the Israelite population and the consequent resource depletion, which could be expected if they were permitted to occupy Moabite land. Balak initially conferred with his Midianite allies in order to block Israelite settlement, before sending his elders to seek Balaam's curse on them. The Midianites appear to have been co-located with the Moabites according to the Targum of Jonathan. They were one alliance of people at this time and therefore had a common interest in preventing Israelite settlement of the area. After his mission with Balaam to curse Israelites failed, Balak decided to ally with Midianites to gather their women in order to lead Israelites' men astray in adultery. Barabbas means literally son of the father or son of the teacher. He is a figure mentioned in the New Testament in which he is an insurrectionary held by the Roman governor at the same time as Jesus. Pontius Pilate freed him at the Passover feast in Jerusalem while keeping Jesus as prisoner. In one such instance, the crowd, the Jews and the multitude in some sources, were offered the choice to have either Barabbas or Jesus released from Roman custody. According to the Synoptic Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the crowd chose Barabbas to be released and Jesus of Nazareth to be crucified. Pilate reluctantly yields to the insistence of the crowd. One passage found in the Gospel of Matthew has the crowd saying, "Let his blood be upon us and upon our children." Matthew refers to Barabbas only as a notorious prisoner Mark and Luke further refer to Barabbas as one involved in a stasis, a riot against the Roman power, who had committed murder. John chapter 18 verse 40 refers to Barabbas as a bandit. The word Josephus always employs when talking about revolutionaries. 3 Gospels state that there was a custom that at Passover the Roman governor would release a prisoner of the crowd's choice. This can be found in Mark chapter 15, Matthew chapter 27, and in John chapter 18. Later copies of Luke contain a corresponding verse, although this is not present in the earliest manuscripts, and may be a later gloss to bring Luke into conformity. The custom of releasing prisoners in Jerusalem at Passover is known to theologians as the Paschal Pardon, but this custom is not recorded in any historical document other than the Gospels, leading some scholars to question its historicity and to claim such a custom was an invention of the writers. Barashel was a Buzite and was the father of Elihu, an antagonist of Job, according to Job 32. Barashel of Ammon was the king of Ammon in 670 BCE. He is known from a small black clay bulla bearing his seal impression. A groove and several dots around the impression demonstrate that the seal likely took the form of a metal ring. Fingerprints found around the edge of the bulla may belong to Barashel himself. His name, which invokes the name of the god El, suggests that El was worshipped in Ammon alongside Milcom and other deities. The seal is aniconic, unusual for a device of its type. Some scholars have speculated that this may be due to the influence of Israelite iconoclasm. Barachias is mentioned in the Bible, the father of the Hebrew prophet Zechariah and son of Iddo, according to Zechariah chapter 1, but probably not the prophet by the same name. In Isaiah 8, he is referred to by the longer form of the same name, Jeberechiah, son of Zerubbabel, according to 1 Chronicles chapter 3, and the Seder Olam Zudah was an exilarch in Babylon. Barak, meaning lightning, was a ruler of ancient Israel. As military commander in the biblical book of Judges, Barak, with Deborah from the tribe of Ephraim, the prophet and fourth judge of pre-monarchic Israel, defeated the Canaanite armies led by Sisera, the son of Abinoam from Kadesh in Naphtali. Barak's mother was from the tribe of Benjamin. His story is told in the book of Judges, chapters 4 and 5. The story of the Hebrews' defeat of the Canaanites led by Sisera, under the prophetic leadership of Deborah and the military leadership of Barak, is related in prose and repeated in poetry. The chief enemy, Jabin, king of Hazor, though a prominent part is played by his commander-in-chief Sisera of Horesheth Hagoyim. Deborah summoned Barak, the son of Abinoam, from his home at Kadesh in Naphtali, and ordered him in the name of Yahweh to take 10,000 men to Mount Tabor. He agreed to on condition that Deborah should go with him. Here he was attacked, as Deborah had expected, by Sisera, whose forces were put to flight, and the greater part of them were slain by Barak's army. Because Barak would not go to battle without Deborah, in turn she prophesied that the honor of victory would not go to him, but rather to a woman in Judges chapter 4. Barak asked Deborah to go with him because of her connection with God. Some scholars see this as Barak being spineless, while others might see Barak making a smart decision, since Deborah was seen as a mediator between God and humans. In the Battle of Mount Tabor, a cloudburst occurred, causing the river to flood, thus limiting maneuverability of the Canaanite chariots. Sisera fled, seeking refuge in the tent of a Canaanite woman, Jael. Jael gave a drink of milk to Sisera, who fell asleep from weariness, then killed him by pounding a tent peg through his head. When Barak arrived, she showed him Sisera, dead in her tent. Bar-Jesus, meaning wise, also known as Elymas, is a Jew described in the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 13, in the New Testament. Acts of the Apostles calls him a magus, which of King James Bible translates as sorcerer. Elymas, the sorcerer struck with blindness, is the title famous cartoon by Raphael, which served as the inspiration for woven tapestries in the Vatican. Elymas is represented as opposing Paul the Apostle in 45 AD, who is called at this point for the first time with his Roman name, and Barnabas in the city of Paphos on Cyprus. When Sergius Paulus, the Roman proconsul, wishes to hear Paul and Barnabas speak about Jesus, because of this opposition, Paul claims that God had decided to make him temporarily blind. A cloud of darkness immediately begins blocking his sight. After this, Sergius Paulus is converted to Christianity. Elymas's intentions for Sergius are unclear. He was desperate to keep him from receiving the word about Jesus. Perhaps he had the proconsul's ear and was his advisor on matters of faith. This would make sense, as Sergius is obviously learned about Jewish teachings, and Elymas is Jewish. The message Paul and Barnabas bring threatens the false prophet's usefulness to the island's most powerful administrator. Bar-Jesus received the same curse that Paul himself did, temporary blindness. It is clear from the passage that Bar-Jesus had the ear of the proconsul and was well known throughout the region. He was a self-proclaimed prophet of God, who may have had his own religious agenda. According to the Golden Legend, Elymas stirred up a riot of Jews and pagans in Salamina against Barnabas. Acts 13 says Elymas the Magus opposed them. Elymas is possibly derived from the Arabic alim, meaning learned or wise, and may be used to translate magos. Bar-Jesus means son of Joshua, or son of Jesus in Aramaic. Don't forget, if you enjoy these videos, please click on the red subscribe button below the video and click the bell for more. This is the biblical name starting with B, part 3. Please stay tuned for part 4. Adonai Nisi, the Lord is our banner. God's blessings be upon us all.